Yeah, so I mean, they played all their guys. They got the win, but Brock Purdy got a little banged up there. So, do you think with Brock Purdy
Yep.
getting hurt and how the season has gone, that it might have affected his ability to get paid next year?
So, yes, definitively. Let me start with the Lions. The Lions side of things is I know there is probably some, decision vindicated, right? By Dan Campbell and the Lions. I totally disagree with that. I thought it was reckless in the moment. And I actually don't think yesterday's game went in a way. I don't think that decision could have been vindicated, but I think the way yesterday's game played out, actually the opposite happened. Because it's just 60 more minutes of football demonstrating that defense can't get stops. 60 more minutes of football demonstrating that the Lions have one way and one way only to beat you. And listen, that offense is awesome. But we knew that offense was awesome before last night's game. And I did not understand Dan Campbell's insistence that, of course, we're playing our guys. When, let's just say, for the sake of argument, the Vikings had lost to the Packers, and then the Lions game last night would have been meaningful, and the Lions win that game. In that scenario, then the Lions would have last night locked up the 1 seed, right? Would Dan Campbell have played all his guys in Week 18? Of course not. I think it was a weird mental block of the meaningless game not being the final game of the year, and therefore he felt an obligation to play his people. But it is not hyperbolic to say Lions-Vikings Week 18 Sunday Night Football, Game 272, where the winner gets the bye, the 1 seed, home field advantage, and the loser is going to be playing on the road starting in round 1 for the entirety of the playoffs. It is not an exaggeration to say that is one of the biggest regular season games when it comes to who's going to win the championship, or certainly who's going to be in the Super Bowl in NFL history. Very, very difficult to find many instances where it is as cut and dry as win the game, you have the best possible path, lose the game, you drop all the way to the 5 line. Now, people can say, it's not. We've had a lot of games where winner gets in the playoffs, loser is eliminated. Those games, when it comes to crowning a champion, are not as meaningful as this Lions-Vikings game. Because typically, if you are in a situation where if you lose in Week 18, you miss the playoffs, you're not championship caliber to begin with. Whoever wins this game is going to have the second best record in the entire NFL. Hell, maybe tied for the best record because the Chiefs' backups might lose. Whoever loses this game is going to have the third best record, but one of the hardest paths. So the reason I'm focused on that is it's not only that you could have been as fresh as possible, it's that your game's Monday night. So you're on short rest now, and you opted into it for the Lions. And you just got more evidence that your team can't get stops. So I did not like that at all. Now on the Brock Purdy stuff. If I were to, before the year, have laid out a worst-case scenario season, this would be really close to it. Where the Avengers are banged up. The Niners win 6 games. At the end of the year, they play their worst football of the season. Like, keep in mind, this Niners season, we are looking at it as right now a season from hell. But it didn't start that way. It started rocky. But they were 5-4. They were 4-4 going into the bye, and then got maybe their best win of the whole season at Tampa Bay to get to 5-4, and were in that moment a game out of first place. Since then, they have lost 6 of 7, and the last 3 they lost like this. When it comes to Brock Purdy, worst case scenario, down 3 to the Rams, 5 minutes left, in field goal range, interception, and you lose. The next week, down 5 against the Dolphins. How much time's left? 2 minutes left. Past midfield, interception, and you lose. Last night, after playing a close to perfect first half of football, down 6, fourth quarter, you've already thrown 1 interception to get the Lions back in it. Interception, and you get banged up, and you lose. You now have a player who is undersized, a legitimate injury concern, who is just had, and he probably won't play against the Cardinals, so that's probably the end of his season, who just had a brutal year where they lost 6 of 7 and 3 straight games, ball in his hands, chance to take the lead, chance to win the game, and threw an interception. And saw this from Josh Dubow, the Associated Press. Brock Purdy went down 1 to 8 points in the fourth quarter or overtime in regular season or the playoffs. 41 for 72, 500 yards, 3 touchdowns, 7 picks, a 53 passer rating. Purdy ranks 151st out of 160 quarterbacks with 50-plus attempts in that scenario this century. You just can't pay that player. Not right now. And I am not saying the Niners are going to move off Brock Purdy in favor of Sam Darnold, but if the opportunity presents itself, they're going to have those discussions. I'm not saying that Brock Purdy is going to all of a sudden show up to training camp next year and see there's another league minimum quarterback on the roster who just happens to be the apple of Kyle Shanahan's eye for the last 10 years, Kirk Cousins, but it's on the board. And I'm not saying that the Niners are going to make the grievous error of bringing in Aaron Rodgers, but they're going to have meetings about it. And here's what they're not going to do, if they have any sense to them whatsoever. Pay Brock Purdy when they don't have to. And he's under contract next year for $1 million. You then have the wildly unfair but incredibly useful franchise tag available to you, and that's the situation. And so I will ask you this, Demonze, before we move on. Last year, I think it's fair to say that you thought I was a little unfair or harsh on Brock Purdy. Having seen this season, if you were the Niners and you had options of giving him the franchise quarterback contract, making him play out his deal, or bringing in another quarterback, I think I know which option you would take, but which of those 3 doors would you walk through?
I definitely would. I wouldn't pay him. I mean, and if I did pay him, I wouldn't pay him the franchise quarterback, standard of money.
Well, right.
Offer it. But is that just not a thing? Do they not accept that? Like $20 million less?
Well, I mean, yeah. So, like, would he take the Baker Mayfield deal, 3 for $100 million? I don't know. Maybe they'll offer him that. Like, maybe that they'll offer him that. I think his agent would say, "You've got to be kidding me. Look at Tua's deal. Look at Trevor's deal. Look at Kyler's deal." And those guys had down years, but it just wasn't their last year. Yeah, and I mean, Brock's been. He needs the guy. And so I think it's a very interesting offseason coming in San Francisco. And all last year, I took the slings and arrows for flatly saying, I'm sorry, I know it's not popular, and I know that his resume of stats and wins and accomplishments measures up favorably to basically any quarterback in NFL history through 25 games, but I didn't believe it. And I think this year's proven it out. Hey, thanks for watching. Hit the subscribe button to get more from the show, and make sure to click the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just click the link in the description below.